Hi, and welcome to our last video for Chapter 14. In this objective, what we're going to look at is short and long run in a perfectly competitive market. So let me go ahead and share my slides with you. Okay, go ahead and start this. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and look at firms in perfectly competitive markets. And here we're going to take a look at the short run and the long run and look at the supply curve for a perfectly competitive market. I did allude to this a lot in the previous segments, so it shouldn't be totally unfamiliar to you. So there are some key assumptions that we're making in market supply. And the first one is that all the firms that enter into the market, all those existing in the market, have identical costs. And if you can see, that's probably a really bad assumption. We're going to dispel it at the end of this particular objective. We're also going to say that firms' costs do not change as others enter or exit. And again, that's probably a poor assumption because it's not actually true in real life. We're going to say that the number of firms in the market in the short term is fixed, and then in the long term is variable. So the short run market supply curve, remember, as long as average variable cost is less than or equal to price, then we're going to produce where marginal revenue and marginal cost meet. So here we have, and this is a good example of taking a look at one firm. And again, here's the supply curve for the one firm in a perfectly competitive market. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is then say, okay, well, how does this market, the whole of the perfectly competitive market, look? So in this example, let me erase that because that was really kind of bad. Partner options. Okay, let's not do that. Let's go down here. And okay. So the market is going to be all of the firms in this perfectly competitive market. In the first segment, we talked about milk. So this is everyone that produces milk, all producers added up together. Okay, so if we have 1,000 identical firms, then what we're going to say is that the price is still going to be equal to marginal revenue, which equals average revenue in a perfectly competitive market. So if we look at this, we're going to have, again, different prices, and we're going to see that different firms will enter in based upon the price in the market. Remember that the market supply is made up of a lot of producers. These producers up here have a higher cost than, say, these producers down here. So these producers here in this particular region of the supply curve can produce at a much more lower cost, and so are much more efficient when we look at this. Okay, so we talked a little bit about in the long run, and we said that because there are no barriers to entry here, that firms are, it's easy to enter and easy to exit. So there's no barriers to entry or barriers to exit. So no barriers. And that's what makes the variability happen in the long run. Okay, so if we have a positive economic profit, what does that mean again to us? That means that price is greater than average variable cost. But notice we're using the term economic profit here. And so remember, that is not only our fixed cost, but our variable cost and our opportunity cost. So that's kind of important to think about that. So as long as there's profitability, then what's going to happen? New firms will enter, the price decreases, so the profits for the industry do reduce, and that slows the entry of new people coming in. If there are losses, then firms will exit the market, some may shut down, and the short run supply curve will shift to the left. Price will decrease, and everyone will have less profit. So when does that condition, that downward spiral or upward spiral, when does that stop? And it stops when is the entry and exit complete is when remaining firms earn zero economic profit. Now remember, that includes opportunity cost. Okay, so that's kind of an important idea to look at. So we're going to say that in the long run, what actually happens here is the zero profit condition exists. Price, which is also marginal revenue in a perfectly competitive market, will equal marginal cost, which will equal average total cost. So they're all going to end up converging in the long run. Okay? So why do some firms stay in business? And again, remember, it's because of opportunity cost. I talk about my business a lot, and by doing all of the labor myself, then the opportunity cost of that, I can actually operate in a zero economic profit status. Some firms don't. Some firms earn enough, and then accounting profit might be positive, which is kind of where I'm at in my business. So here we have one firm. Notice we are looking at the long run average total cost curve here for one firm, just one. Then we'll look at it for the market. And what tends to happen is that price, again, price, marginal revenue, and average revenue all being the same, notice they're going to converge. So long run supply, where economic profit is equal to zero, is going to be equal to price, which is equal to marginal revenue, which is equal to average revenue. And those are all going to converge in the long run. Therefore, we will not get individuals that want to enter this market, so no entry. And likewise, we will get no exit. Okay, so a firm begins in the long run. So again, here we have the one firm. Remember, price is equal to marginal revenue. So we're going to produce right here. Notice this is where average total cost, marginal revenue, and marginal cost are all the same. And so that's where we're at this point. If we look at it, here's our long run supply curve. Here's the demand by the buyers in the market. And here's the supply curve representing those suppliers in the market. Now, just as we studied in Chapter 4, many things can cause an increase in the market or a decrease in the market. So let's say a headline reads that milk is a cure for corona. Okay, take a moment and think about what might happen in this instance. In this instance, if you said, I think the demand curve will shift outward, you're exactly right, and it would shift outward to D2. That means that the price in the market is going to increase to P2, which means that firms are now going to produce more, because this is the quantity that maximizes profit, which means now we have profitability, so firms will enter into the market. When firms enter, that's going to push the supply curve outward and to the right, and it ends up being over here at S2. Notice we kind of converge back at that long run equilibrium. Okay, let me erase the slide because I've drawn so much on it. I want to walk you through it just to make sure that you understand. Okay, so we're in long run equilibrium, but then an increase in demand raises price, expectations, many different things, probably milk right now because it's a staple or one of those things. So the coronavirus could have shifted this. Okay. Okay, when the demand curve shifts out, the price is going to increase. It does so for the market. Now notice that the one firm has profitability right here. So we have profitability. Then what happens is additional suppliers will enter into the market, and we end up kind of back at that long run equilibrium. When the additional suppliers enter into the market, the price in fact does go down. Okay, so why might the long run supply curve for the market actually slope upward? And remember, we made some assumptions in saying that they would all converge. And the first assumption is that all firms have identical costs. We know that's not necessarily true. We also know that not all costs remain constant as firms enter or exit. So if either one of these is not true, and I think we can make a good case that both of them may not be true, then the long run supply curve slopes upward. Firms do in fact face differing costs, okay? Geographic areas, supplier, long-term supply, short-term supply, and so on. So what should you take away here? You should probably take away that because those assumptions that we made at the beginning are untrue, the long run market supply curve normally in a perfectly competitive market slopes upward. Costs rise as a firm enters the market. That's probably true as well. And again, especially when we talk about those inelastic supplies, okay? Because it's limited. Then there's not availability to that key resource. So the increase in demand would cause the price to rise, which would increase all firms' costs. So what should you gain from this? Again, that the long run, perfectly competitive market probably does slope upward. Okay, that is the end of this objective, which is also the end of this particular exercise.